2024 has the potential to be one of the craziest years in video games like ever. I definitely think we're all waiting for this Xbox podcast to happen tomorrow to talk about the future of Xbox, something about a Nintendo Direct partner showcase happening tomorrow as well. Could they coincide with each other? The Nintendo Switch 2. It's been a tumultuous year for the video game industry, just as far as people wanting answers, people wanting explanations about something. Well, we can't forget about the good old PlayStation 5, because obviously they're gearing up for a big year in 2024, right? Like, things are going to be crazy. We're probably going to be seeing a bunch of new first-party games that have been cooking for a while, and this system is just finally hitting its stride, and we're going to be getting all these major IPs, and that's actually not the case, because we had a Bloomberg article go out today with quote from Sony themselves talking about the upcoming fiscal year for Sony PlayStation 5 owners. And it's pretty interesting. I'm not going to say it's doom and gloom or anything like that, because I feel like, the market will sort of dictate that. But there were some definitely interesting quotes that were said in this initial write-up of it, and then some additional comments that we've gotten from Sony themselves that paint a very interesting picture. I'm still waiting on that big, Sony showcase blowout, because they were holding stuff back last year. Remember that whole thing? And then we found out that wasn't the case, but it doesn't seem like I'm getting that really anytime soon. So a quote from the Bloomberg article talking about the PlayStation 5 hardware itself. It seems like it's been selling very well. Of course, they've done a couple revisions already with the detachable disk drive. But here's a quote from the Bloomberg article here. I'll have a link to it in the description box down below. Sony trimmed its revenue forecast after sales of its flagship PlayStation 5 in the December quarter came in roughly 1 million units lower than average analyst estimates, at 8.2 million consoles. The company also said it now expects to sell 21 million console units for the fiscal year, down from the previous forecast of 25 million units. Looking ahead, PlayStation 5 will enter the latter stage of its life cycle, said Naomi Matsuoka, Senior Vice President. As such, we will put more emphasis on the balance between profitability and sales. For this reason, we expect the annual sales pace of PlayStation 5 hardware to start falling from the next fiscal year. Looking ahead, PlayStation 5 will enter the latter stage of its life cycle. Now, I'm sorry. I've had a PlayStation 5 since day one. I've had an Xbox Series X since day one. To me, I feel like these consoles have not really gotten started. Yes, there has been games for it. There's been some first-party games and stuff like that, but when you compare it to the output of other PlayStation hardware, and, it just feels like we haven't gotten that same first-party output that we've gotten on pretty much every PlayStation console to date. So to say that you're entering the latter stage of your life cycle with this system, it's like I'm still waiting for like the cruise control segment where you have all these games built up and you start releasing all of these games, and you have all this sort of, all of these major titles ready to go. And latter stage of your life cycle, have we tapped out the power of the PlayStation 5 already? The power of the SSD? It just feels like yesterday that we were introduced to this system. And now to hear that we're in the latter stages of the life cycle from Sony themselves, there's still games coming out for the PlayStation 4. A massive amount of games coming out for the PlayStation 4. Some first-party games are still coming out on the PlayStation 4. Why? That sounds like a transitional period from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5. So I don't really understand that quote. But things get even more bizarre. So if that wasn't enough for you, if that wasn't enough to confuse you, Here's something else. This is coming from a Gematsu article in which Chief Financial Officer of Sony Group, he's also the Sony Group president, Hiroki Totoki, I'm probably saying that wrong, Todoki, there it is. Here's your first party games. Regarding first-party software, we aim to continue to focus on producing high-quality works and developing live service games. But while major projects are currently under development, we do not plan to release any new major existing franchise titles next fiscal year from April 1st of 2024 and through March 31st, 2025, like God of War Ragnarok and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And then there's a graph that goes along with this, that the PlayStation 5 sales will be decreasing, software sales will decrease with no major plan for release of major franchise titles, and then they're going to be expanding into network services revenue, and obviously some of these live service games. So reading this initially, decrease with no plan for release of major franchise titles. There's two ways to read this. There's two ways to read this, in my opinion. And I'm not even sure which way we are supposed to read this. But, you know, if we're talking about first-party software, major franchise titles and new major existing franchise titles. So if we're just talking about sequels, remasters, and stuff like that, like, I don't necessarily think that's the end of the world. I don't need another Spider-Man or another God of War game or anything like that. But I'm still assuming that we're going to be getting new first-party titles, right? And new projects. Like, the explanation of this, I feel like, is very wishy-washy at best. And developing live service games, haven't we already established that we don't want these live service games? We're not really interested in all of these live service games. You can only have so many live service. Like, people, if they get attached to a live service game, it's like one. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's only a certain amount of people that will get attached to your live service game. And if you're putting all this money, time, effort, and resources into these live service games, instead of focusing on what I feel has always been kind of the backbone of a Sony platform with your standard first party titles that aren't live service games. Like, what am I reading here? I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, because I am the king of, PlayStation YouTube at the end of the day. But what am I reading here? Because to me, you're essentially saying, hey, you know what? We're in the latter stages of the PlayStation 5 here. We're going to be wrapping things up. There's really not going to be many first-party titles this year. Like, this sounds like a lot like the Vita, where they just kind of threw the Vita out there, and then they stopped really pushing out first-party titles for it, and they made, like, third-party developers kind of support the system while they either figured out, like, what their next move is going to be. Are we going to continue to support the Vita? Are we going to move on to a next thing? Or are we just going to kill the handheld division? None of this sounds positive to me. I'm trying to take away some positives from this. I'm trying to establish some things that are good, but these diehard Sony PlayStation fanboys, can you really make fun of what Xbox is doing with the lack of first party titles when your president comes out and is like, these major IPs we have, I don't really expect too much this year. Software sales are going to be down. We're transitioning. We're at the end. We're at the latter stages of this system's life cycle. I don't know. I don't want to read any of that. I don't want to see any of that. As a PlayStation owner, I don't want to see any of that. But it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense because we go back to the Insomniac leaks. Venom is a 2025 game. We already know that. That game's not getting pushed up or anything like that. It's a 2025 game. Wolverine's essentially a 2026 game. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's Insomniac. They're the one company that's been putting out titles with the PlayStation 5 more so than any other first-party developer. Like, I don't get how people are just, cool with this. Like, it's bizarre to me. It definitely feels like we're getting to a point with video game costs and video game development and, you know, budgets and stuff like that, that, you know, where if these games don't sell a substantial amount of units, then they're gonna not do well, and then studios will be in trouble. But at the same time, it feels like the amount of games that we're getting is definitely shrinking, and it's shrinking rapidly. And we're talking about first party games from major companies. Like, I don't know. If you don't think that at some point there could be a video game crash again, to where like a lot of these big companies, I mean, some of these big companies are already biting the dust. And I'm not saying Sony's going to bite the dust or anything like that, because I don't think that's going to happen. But eventually you get to a point where push comes to shove. I just don't know, man. I don't know. You know what? Take this information, take these quotes, and do with them as you will. Talk about it in the comments section. Share this with your friends and family and your enemies and stuff like that, because I don't want to hear any of this from Sony. I want to be hearing, hey, we got like 7 first-party games coming out this year. None of this live service crap. We got banger after banger after banger. And it doesn't seem like we're getting that this year. But hey, I'm sure that big Sony showcase is still cooking in the oven. Let me know what you think of all this, though, in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 500,000 subscribers, and I could finally shut up about it. We had a bunch of snow in the Northeast yesterday, but it's mostly melting already, so that's a good thing. And as always, guys, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.